What if the most revolutionary art of the last century wasn't hanging in a museum, but was born on the streets of Harlem, in the heart of ancient African kingdoms, and in the soul of a people fighting to tell their own story? This isn't just art history. This is the story of how Black artists fought for their voice, their image, and their legacy, completely transforming our culture from the ground up. This is the evolution of Black art from the streets to the world. Long before the European Renaissance, African civilizations were creating works of astonishing power. In places like Nigeria, the Nowak culture was crafting intricate terracotta sculptures. Far back as 500 BC, the kingdom of Ife was making breathtakingly real brass and terracotta heads, while the Benin kingdom was famous for its detailed bronze plaques that documented royal life. This wasn't primitive art. It was a complex visual language tied to community, spirituality, and power. In fact, the abstract forms of ancient African art would later blow the minds of European modern artists like Picasso and Matisse, giving them the key to unlock movements like Cubism. But the story takes a violent turn with the transatlantic slave trade. A forced diaspora scattered millions of Africans across the Americas, stripping them of their homes, but not their creativity. In this new, brutal world, art became an act of survival, a way to hold on to memory and humanity. The earliest Black art in America was often functional and anonymous. Intricately woven baskets, carved gourds, and quilts that secretly held maps to freedom. As the nation was forged, the first Black artists creating in the European tradition emerged, often against unimaginable odds. Their very existence was an act of defiance. This brings us to our first trailblazers, the pioneers who painted against the odds. First, there's Joshua Johnson. Born into slavery around 1763, he became one of the very first documented African American painters to become a free man and actually make a living from his craft. He was a portrait painter in Baltimore, capturing the likenesses of wealthy merchant families. His work is a quiet but powerful testament to a Black artist achieving professional status when most Black people were legally considered property. Next up, the incredible Edmonia Lewis. Born free in New York in the 1840s to a Black father and a Native American mother, Lewis simply refused to be defined by her era's suffocating rules. After facing intense racism at Oberlin College, she traveled to Rome, where she could finally work freely. There, she became an internationally acclaimed sculptor, creating stunning works that often explored themes of Black and Indigenous liberation. She didn't just succeed. She escaped the artistic chains of America to find fame on her own terms. And then there is Henry Asawa Tanner. Born in Pittsburgh in 1859, Tanner became the first African American painter to achieve international acclaim. Like Lewis, he found that his talent was better received in Europe. He moved to Paris and became known for his deeply moving religious scenes. Tanner's success abroad was a beacon of hope, but it also highlighted a painful truth. For many early Black artists, getting recognition at home was nearly impossible. They had to master European styles, painting landscapes and portraits for a white audience, often unable to truly explore their own heritage in their art. They laid the foundation, but a revolution was needed to break the mold. And that revolution was right around the corner. That spark was ignited by one of the largest internal movements in American history, the Great Migration. From the early to mid-20th century, millions of African Americans left the rural Jim Crow South for industrial cities in the North. They were fleeing racial violence and searching for work, and they brought their culture, their music, and their dreams with them. This flood of people created vibrant, concentrated Black communities in cities like Chicago and most famously, New York's Harlem. And in Harlem in the 1920s, something extraordinary happened. It was a cultural Big Bang, the Harlem Renaissance. For the very first time, Black artists, writers, and musicians were at the center of a movement celebrating Black life unapologetically. The air was electric with jazz, the pages filled with the poetry of Langston Hughes. And crucially, the canvases began to reflect the people creating this new world. After centuries of being either invisible in art or shown through a racist lens, Black artists were finally painting their own communities. This was more than art. It was a radical act of self-definition. This era gave us titans who shaped a whole new visual language for Black America. Let's start with Augusta Savage. She wasn't just a brilliant sculptor. She was a fierce advocate and a community builder. As a teacher, she mentored an entire generation of artists, including the great Jacob Lawrence. Her studio was a hub of creative energy. She fought tirelessly for Black artists to be included in the mainstream art world and, when rejected, she just created her own opportunities. Her powerful sculpture, the harp, made for the 1939 New York World's Fair, was a monumental celebration of Black musical heritage. Then there was Richmond Bart, another masterful sculptor who rose to fame during this period. His works were known for their sensitivity, capturing the grace and strength of the human body. Bart celebrated the Black form in a way that was both dignified and deeply human, pushing back against the ugly caricatures that had dominated pop culture. And you can't talk about the look of the Harlem Renaissance without talking about Aaron Douglas. Often called the father of Black American art, Douglas created a style that was completely new and modern. He blended the geometric shapes of Art Deco, the flattened perspective of Cubism, and rhythmic patterns inspired by African art. His murals and paintings tell a sweeping story of African American history, from Africa to slavery to freedom and the modern city. His work for magazines like The Crisis and his iconic illustrations for God's Trombones literally defined the look of the era. Douglas wasn't just painting pictures. He was creating a modern mythology for Black people. This cultural explosion was so powerful that even the U.S. government took notice. During the Great Depression, the Works Progress Administration actually funded many of these artists, commissioning murals that let them keep working. For the first time, Black artists were being paid by the government to tell their stories on the walls of public libraries and community centers. The Harlem Renaissance was a declaration. It was a statement that Black is beautiful, that Black life is worthy of art, and that the Black artist would no longer be invisible. It created a legacy of pride that would fuel the even more revolutionary movements to come. If the Harlem Renaissance was a cultural awakening, the period that followed was a call to arms. By the 1950s and 60s, the fight for racial equality had exploded into the civil rights movement. And as activists marched, artists picked up their own weapons: paintbrushes, printing presses, and cameras. Art was no longer just about being seen. It became an engine of protests, a tool for revolution. This shift gave birth to the Black Arts Movement, or BAM, which flourished from about 1965 to 1975. The writer Larry Neal called it the aesthetic and spiritual sister of the Black Power concept, and BAM was arguably the most politically charged art movement in American history. Its purpose was crystal clear: to create art for, by, and about Black people. It rejected white artistic standards and institutions, instead creating its own galleries, publishing houses, and theaters. The art was proudly Afrocentric, celebrating Black power and a direct connection to African heritage. This was art for the people, not for the museum. This movement produced a generation of artistic revolutionaries. At the forefront was Emory Douglas, the Minister of Culture for the Black Panther Party. His art wasn't meant for gallery walls. It was meant for the streets, printed in the Black Panther newspaper, which reached hundreds of thousands of people. Depicted Black people not as victims, but as powerful, armed, and ready to fight for their freedom. His images were stark, confrontational, and incredibly effective. He created a visual identity for the revolution that is still iconic today. Then there's the incomparable Faith Ringgold. A painter, sculptor, and writer, Ringgold's work directly took on racism and sexism. When she found that her large political paintings were being ignored by the art world, she switched to a medium that couldn't be dismissed: the story quilt. By sewing her painted narratives onto fabric, she tapped into a long tradition of Black women's craft and infused it with radical politics. Her famous quilt, Tar Beach, tells the story of a young Black girl in Harlem who dreams of flying over the city, claiming it all as her own. It's a work of both whimsical fantasy and profound social commentary. We also have to talk about Elizabeth Catlett, sculptor and printmaker. Catlett dedicated her long career to celebrating the strength of Black women. After moving to Mexico in the 1940s, she joined a collective of printmakers who believed art should create social change. Her powerful woodcuts like Sharecropper depict the dignity of everyday working-class Black people. She believed that art could and should have a political purpose to speak for those who had been silenced. The Black Arts Movement was about building institutions just as much as it was about creating art. Collectives like Africa Bra in Chicago developed a shared artistic style, using bright Kool-Aid colors and positive images to uplift their communities. Murals celebrating Black heroes were painted on buildings in Black neighborhoods, turning the city itself into an outdoor museum of Black pride. This movement fundamentally shifted the purpose of Black art. It was a declaration of cultural independence. It asserted that the Black experience didn't need to be validated by the white establishment. It was complete, powerful, and revolutionary all on its own, while the Black Arts Movement was building its own institutions. Another artistic revolution was literally brewing in the streets. in the economically wrecked New York City of the 70s and 80s, a new art form was exploding out of the subways. Graffiti, for a generation of young, marginalized kids with spray cans. The entire city was their canvas. This was art at its most defiant, a way to claim space and be seen in a society that tried to make you invisible. At first, the art world dismissed it as vandalism, but the energy was just too powerful to ignore, and one person, more than anyone, would carry the raw power of the streets into the most elite galleries in the world and become a global phenomenon. That artist was Jean-Michel Basquiat. Basquiat started as a teenager in the late 70s, spray painting cryptic poems across Lower Manhattan under the tag Samo for same old crap. His work was smart, funny, and critical, and it got people talking. Who was this Samo? Soon, the art world found out. By the early 80s, Basquiat had traded spray cans for canvases, but he brought that same frenetic, untamed energy with him. His rise was like a lightning strike. He was young, brilliant, and a black artist in a white-dominated art world he both fascinated and criticized. His style was a chaotic, glorious explosion of influences. The rawness of street art, the intensity of neo-expressionism, and the deep knowledge of an artist who devoured history and music. His canvases are dense patchworks of words, symbols, and figures. He scribbled, crossed out words, and layered images, creating a visual map of a mind thinking at light speed. But beneath that chaos was a razor-sharp social commentary. Basquiat's work constantly wrestled with race, power, and colonialism. He painted his heroes black athletes, musicians, and historical figures, often crowning them with his signature three-pointed crown. It was a symbol that both anointed them as royalty and critiqued the very idea of fame and history. In paintings like Hollywood Africans, he directly confronted the racist caricatures offered to black actors. He wasn't just making art. He was correcting the historical record, forcing black figures into a narrative that had systematically shut them out. His friendship and collaboration with Andy Warhol was a landmark moment, a meeting of two cultural titans that symbolized the merger of pop art, street culture, and the high art market. Hewitt kicked the door down, proving that the energy of the streets couldn't just hang in a museum, it could command staggering prices at auction. Tragically, Basquiat died at just 27, but his legacy is immeasurable. He created the blueprint for how an artist from the margins could conquer the mainstream without selling out their edge. He broke the barrier between high and low culture forever and paved the way for the contemporary artists who would follow, artists who now dominate a global stage he helped build. Because of the foundations laid by all those who came before, from the self-love of Harlem to the political fire of BAM, and the market-shattering arrival of Basquiat, black art today is more visible and influential than ever. Contemporary black artists aren't just part of the conversation, they are leading it. They are working in every medium imaginable: painting, sculpture, photography, huge installations. Their work is being celebrated in major exhibitions all over the world. They are the vanguard, reclaiming history and defining the future of art itself. Let's look at just a few of the modern masters shaping how we see the world today. First, there's Kerry James Marshall. Marshall has dedicated his career to one monumental task: correcting the overwhelming absence of Black people from the history of Western art. As he points out, when you look at the old masters, you see a world filled with white faces, where Black figures are either missing or pushed to the side. Marshall's work fixes this. He paints large, complex scenes of Black life: barbershops, housing projects, living rooms, using the grand style of historical paintings. His figures are painted in shades of stark, unapologetic black, a deliberate choice to assert their presence. He is, in essence, filling the world's museums with the images that should have been there all along. Then we have Kehinde Wiley, an artist whose work has become globally iconic. Like Marshall, Wiley is in a direct conversation with the art of the past, but with a modern twist. He takes the grand, heroic portrait styles once reserved for European kings and recasts contemporary Black men and women in those roles. He finds his subjects on the streets of cities from Harlem to Lagos and paints them in heroic poses against vibrant, decorative backdrops. His work flips our traditional ideas of power on their head, asking us, who deserves to be seen as majestic? Who gets to be immortalized? His most famous work, of course, is his presidential portrait of Barack Obama. A painting that placed a contemporary Black artist and a Black president firmly into the national story forever. He finds his subjects on the streets of cities from Harlem to Lagos and paints them in heroic poses against vibrant, decorative backdrops. His work flips our traditional ideas of power on their head, asking us, who deserves to be seen as majestic? Who gets to be immortalized? His most famous work, of course, is his presidential portrait of Barack Obama, a painting that placed a contemporary Black artist and a Black president firmly into the national story forever. And we have to acknowledge Kara Walker, an artist who confronts America's dark past with a haunting and provocative beauty. Walker is best known for using a seemingly simple medium, the Black paper silhouette. But in her hands, this quaint, old-fashioned art form becomes a tool to expose the brutal reality of slavery. Her life-sized cutouts create panoramic scenes that look elegant from a distance, but reveal horrific, violent, and deeply unsettling stories when you look closer. Walker forces you to confront the repressed horrors of American history, using beauty as a lure to draw you into a conversation you might otherwise try to avoid. These three artists are just the tip of the iceberg. From the textile-based portraits of Geo Swaby to the genre-bending installations of Adam Pendleton, Black artists today are pushing boundaries and exploring identity, race, and history with breathtaking creativity. They are commanding record prices at auction and are the subjects of major shows at the world's most prestigious museums. We've journeyed from ancient kingdoms to modern galleries, but we've only scratched the surface of this vast and powerful story. The conversation doesn't end here. The legacy of Black art is being built every single day. So now, we turn it over to you. Who are the artists that move you? Drop a comment below and tell us about a Black artist from any era, in any medium whose work everyone should know about. Let's build a gallery right here in the comments and celebrate the artists who are shaping our world. So, what's the big picture here? The story of Black art is a story of resilience, innovation, and reclamation. It's a story that starts in ancient Africa, where art was inseparable from life. It's a story that survived the brutal rupture of slavery, emerging in the quiet defiance of its earliest American pioneers. We saw it explode with confidence during the Harlem Renaissance, where artists declared their lives worthy of being seen. We saw it forged into a weapon during the Black Arts movement, where art became a tool for liberation. We saw it erupt from the streets with the raw energy of Basquiat, crashing through the doors of the art world and changing the game forever. And today, we see Black artists at the very center of global culture, not as outsiders, but as leaders. The evolution of Black art isn't just a straight line. It's a dynamic, ongoing conversation with the past and a bold vision for the future. From the streets to the world, this art doesn't just reflect culture. It creates it. The story is still being written, painted, and sculpted, and its most powerful chapters may be yet to come.